everyone, Rocket here. I wanted to show you what I've done with my Scala Rider Q2. I modified it because of these speakers. Question is, why did I get rid of them? The speakers have mediocre sound at best. Also, my helmet is very loud. So with a loud helmet, I usually need to wear earplugs or something to keep the wind noise from deafening me. But if I do that, then the whole setup is useless. So what I decided to do was take headphones that I've used previously. They're reasonably cheap. They're Sony EX, and they're like 40 bucks, and actually have decent sound. And they're really tiny, so they sit inside the helmet. They don't pull out when you put your helmet on, even if you have a really tight fit. So those are the ones that I've used. First thing you should do is test the unit before you start cutting the lines. If it came from the factory because it was built on a Monday and the guy who was building it fell asleep at the wheel, whatever it is, if you cut those wires, you bring it in, even if it was their fault, you're going to have a pretty difficult time returning it.
Stop. This is... Oh, you know, you're like a child. Talking, if you just one time. Zip it.
So what are you going to need? First, you're going to need some small wire cutters. The bigger these things get, the more crude and difficult they are to handle with these tiny wires. So I would use something that's a little more for fine detail. A place to work. I would not work on your kitchen table. Find a workbench, whatever, but this is also something that I find useful no matter where I'm working. It's just a piece of tile. It keeps the solder, things like that, from burning, and it's just it's easy to clean up. Solder, this one's electrical solder, and you'll need an assortment of these shrinking insulator tubes. They come in assorted sizes. You can see it just as an example. There's a few that are a little bit larger. They shrink only this way. They don't shrink this way, so whatever length you cut, that's the length that's going to stay. And a soldering iron. Oh, one other thing I don't have on here is flux. Flux is just a little paste that you paste onto the wire itself. It allows you to, for the solder to bind a little bit better to the wire. After testing all the features, you're going to have to cut the wires. So what I do is I cut as far down as I possibly could on the Scala Rider, and then as short as I want in terms of the length of the headphone itself. Because if I cut up the headphone and I screw it up, this is 40 bucks. That's a lot more. So it's just better to have more of this wire. And not only that though, but this wire is going to be thicker and more robust than this one anyway. In terms of length, I would test what you need. Depends on what you like. Like my buddy did the same thing to his, and he only wanted a short wire that was just long enough for him to set his helmet on his head, put the headphones in, and then pull his helmet down. For myself, I actually wanted to put my helmet upside down on the seat of my bike, so mine are quite a bit longer. I might shorten this one up anyways, because it is a little extra long. Any extra wire, you just have to tuck it up inside your helmet when you're done. But overall, it's pretty good.
Missed it by that much.
So what you're going to have to do is, once you've cut it to the length that you need for your specific needs, you need to pull back the wire. I'll just pull this over here. I'm obviously not going to show you step for step. I'm just going to walk you through it because I've already done it with these. But when you cut the wire, you pull it back, you strip just a little bit. With this particular Sony headphone, the sheath here is really elastic. So the first time I cut it, I pulled on the thing, and it actually had pulled over top of the wire I just finished cutting. No! So it was actually, once I figured that out, I didn't have to cut as much, and just enough to grab onto the bare wire and pull back the sheath, which worked really, really well, because then I didn't have to cut as much off. When you see the wire, you're going to see on most headphones, you're going to see two. but off the Scala Rider you actually see 3. I think the third one is a ground. What all you really have to do is match the colors. But before you actually match the colors, you're going to actually have to burn the colors off, because it's actually just bare copper wire with a spray that keeps the wires from actually contacting one another and shorting out the connection. So the easiest way to do that is, let's say this is the wire here, just for argument's sake. You just touch it down to the hot. You don't pull or try and strip it off, because you'll break the tiny copper wires. So you just sit it there and burn off the color until you see more or less bare copper. If you don't do that, you're not going to get a connection. Doesn't matter how much solder you use. And then you'll curse my name. So burn that stuff off. Make sure that it's off as much as possible, but not all of it, because anywhere that you expose the bare copper wire is somewhere you're going to have to isolate it, or insulate it, sorry. So it's important that wherever you, just only as much as you need. Before you actually start putting them together, you need to actually cut lengths of this tubing off. And again, you don't need a lot, but you don't need to insulate, put one on each wire. You only need to put one on one of the wires, and then the other one will be covered by one that you put over top of the entire thing, because you're just separating them, so just to keep the bulk down. You cut a piece. What I found was not much more than this. This is all you really needed to take. You put it onto the wire, you slide it back as far as you can, keep it out of the heat, because it will shrink even just by ambient heat. And then you take a slightly larger one and put it onto one of the wires and slide it back as far as possible, because once you put the wires together, you're not going to be able to slide this on anywhere. So I actually made that mistake. So all the way through, it's good to test. I test with just an MP3 player, hooked it up to it, and had a music playing through it. And I knew that the connection was sound when I could hear the music coming out of it, and that was really useful. You take the 2 wires, you put them together, and then you twist, and then bend the one side down whichever way. So that way it's got an extra strong connection, because you're going to be reefing on this from time to time accidentally. It needs to be rugged. Then paint it with flux, then put the solder on, and it's a touch. It's something you have to learn. It's good to practice on something if you want to practice on it first before you get to this. Definitely a good idea to practice. So once you're done with that, then you slide the small piece over top of one of the connections that's already on the wire. Slide it over, and then what you do is, easiest way is actually just take a lighter and from farther away, not too close, slowly shrink it down around one of the connections. And be careful with the heat, because if it accidentally burns some of that color off, you're going to have to then, cut a larger section, start over, or use some electrical tape, and it's just going to get pretty ugly pretty fast.
You blew it up! Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
So try and keep the heat as far away as possible. Plus this stuff actually starts to melt really easily, so you don't need to be too close. Then once you're done shrinking over one of the connections, you take your larger one that's already on the wire as well, slide it over top, done, and shrink it. Repeat to the other headphone, and that's it. If you have any questions...
Could I ask a question, Macho Man?
No more questions.
I'm sorry about that.